Welcome, welcome, my friends, to the new Hanukah edition of More Bad News, brought to you, as always, by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camel's Challenge, smoke Camels for 30 days, and see for yourself what a difference this product can make for your life. Well, it seems that almost every year Hanukkah arrives in the midst of conflict, both in the Middle East and in the world. This year is certainly no exception. In the midst of this turmoil, we celebrate Hanukkah, the miracle of the little jar of oil that burned for 8 days. According to the legend, the Maccabees liberated the Holy Temple from the Syrians, and they wanted to light the menorah, but they only had a tiny jar of consecrated oil. The tiny jar would last only for a single day and burn for 8 days. Actually, the Hanukkah was observed for 600 years before the jar of oil story first appeared in Jewish literature. The Maccabees recaptured and rededicated the temple in Jerusalem in 164 BCE. The history of the Maccabean revolt is recorded in the Book of Maccabees, written shortly after the revolt, and it makes no mention of any kind of miracle of oil. So, what was the great miracle that marks the celebration of the holiday? For some time, from the time of the conquest of Palestine by Alexander the Great in 332, the Jews were ruled by Hellenistic governments, that is, governments that were dominated by Greek language and culture. Uh, Greek influence on Hebrew was absolutely amazing. The Song of Songs is the result of the marriage between Hebrew and Greek. It's absolutely wonderful. But from the death of Alexander in 323 until the accession of the Syrian Greek king Antiochus Epiphanes in 175, the Jews managed to maintain a modicum of religious autonomy. As a result, they paid their yearly tributes and they caused no problems, and they fought among themselves between the Hellenists and the religious extremists, just as in Israel today. The reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, however, marked a turning point in Jewish history. Antiochus Epiphanes, Epiphanes meaning the visible God, Antiochus, the visible manifestation of God on earth. Very fitting, I think, for quite a few of our Antiochuses today. He said he wanted everyone to speak Greek and follow the Greek customs and worship Greek gods. Antiochus decided that Judaism was to be abolished. The Jews had to choose between the Greek religion or death. And in 168, Antiochus had the temple dedicated to Jupiter. A swine was sacrificed in the altar courtyard, was spread with the blood in the Holy of Holies, and the pig fat was used to burn Torah scrolls. He issued a decree that all the towns in Judea around the people would have to renounce the laws of Moses and sacrifice to Greek gods. Troops from the king made the rounds around Jerusalem, and before long, Syrian troops arrived in the little town of Moedain, and were summoned the inhabitants to abandon the law and become idol worshippers. There they met Mattathias, the Hasmonean, and his sons, Yonatan, Shimon, Judah, Eliezer, and Yochanan. Mattathias refused to obey. And when an apostate ran up to offer the pagan sacrifices, Mattathias drew a sword from the Syrian sheath and slew the man. His sons then fell upon the Syrian troops with long knives, and they destroyed the altar. Mattathias declared, "Whoever is for the law, follow me," and he began a guerrilla war. Mattathias started a guerrilla war, and upon his death in 167, his son Judah took command of the army. Judah was a warrior such as the house of Israel had not seen since the days of David and Joab. In battle, he was like a lion in his rage. Under his leadership, Syrian armies were defeated. The plan to Hellenize the Jews was now over. Antiochus decided the Jews didn't deserve Greek culture. He therefore ordered Lysias to conquer Judea, to exterminate the Jews and every trace of Jerusalem. Lysias chose two generals, Nicanor and Gorgias, to lead the expedition. Gorgias led the first attack with a large army and cavalry from the Philistine coast to Judea. And the Judean army numbered around 6,000, and his army was about 40,000. Nevertheless, he was so certain of victory that he invited slave traders to come along with him and bring money and chains. But Gorgias was mistaken. His army panicked before the Lion of Judah. The victory over Gorgias crippled the enemy and inspired the Jews. The Maccabean army increased to 10,000 and waited for the arrival of Lysias. With the defeat of Lysias' second army, Judah was able to retake Jerusalem. 3.5 years had passed since the beginning of the desecration of the temple. The city was wrecked, the temple was destroyed, its gates were burned, its halls were destroyed, idolatrous altars were everywhere. The image of Zeus towered over the altar. In the month of Kislev 165, they began clearing the temple grounds. A new altar was built, and new vessels were brought in, and a new gate was built. All the preparations were completed within 3 weeks, and early on the morning of the 25th of Kislev in 165, the temple was rededicated. The great menorah was lit, and a joyous celebration carried on for 8 days, the first Hanukah. The story of Hanukah usually ends here with something like, and they lived happily ever after, but that is not what happened. The Jews still had enemies on all sides. Instead of one mighty enemy, now they faced the Philistines in the southwest, the Phoenicians in the northwest, the Ammonites on the other side of the Jordan, the Idumeans in the south, all of them ready to invade Judah. The Judeans in the Galilee and Gilead were already under attack. Judah Maccabee lost no time, sending his brother Shimon with an army to the Galilee, while Yonatan was sent to Hebron to fight the Idumeans. Another force was sent to guard the western boundaries against an attack from the Philistines. In the spring of 163, the Syrians were ready to try to retake and reestablish control over Palestine. A new Syrian army led by Lysias and a herd of elephants marched into Judah. The Jewish army was disheartened by the sight of the mighty elephants, but Judah's brother Eliezer ran under one of the elephants and thrust his sword into the animal's belly, killing it. The animal fell on Eliezer and crushed him, but the Jewish fighters took courage from the fallen hero. Even elephants could be defeated with courage. The Syrians laid siege to Jerusalem, and the temple would have fallen had not the rebellion unexpectedly broken out in Antioch, forcing Lysias to return home to defend his king. Lysias signed a treaty with the Hasmoneans, agreeing to allow the Jews religious freedom, and Judah Maccabee was elected the new high priest. Peace did not last long. The coronation of Demetrius, a new king in Syria, offered an opportunity for the Hellenists to avenge themselves, and they sent emissaries to present the long history of rivalry between the Hasmoneans and the Hellenists to Demetrius. They urged Demetrius to appoint a new high priest, and Demetrius saw this as an opportunity to assert his authority again, and so he sent the ruthless Bachades with an army who marched across the Galilee to Jerusalem, killing everything in his path. Judah met Bachades at the Battle of Elysia, and here Judah fell in 160 BCE. With this defeat, the Syrians once again took Jerusalem. The Hasmoneans, led by the remaining 3 sons of Mattathias, Yonatan, Shimon, and Yochanan, carried on the struggle, reduced once again to a small guerrilla force led by Yonatan. In an effort to protect their women and children, Yonatan led them to safety among the Nabateans, and on the way they were attacked by marauding vandals, and Yonatan was killed. With the rebellion crushed, the Syrians withdrew their troops and ignored Judah for as long as they got their regular tribute. Yonatan and Shimon set up fortified camps in the desert of Jericho on the banks of the Jordan, and they continued to carry on a small guerrilla war, and eventually a truce was signed. As the book of Maccabees eloquently notes, and so the sword rested in Israel. Yonatan ruled from 152 to 144 when he was killed by the Syrian general Tryphon in an attempt to recapture Jerusalem. Shimon was the last of the Hasmonean brothers, took charge of the army and held off the Syrians. So where was the miracle? Oppression, warfare, turmoil, and destruction carried on for decades. A heroic family reduced to the last son in a bitter struggle, only to survive to live on to yet more bloody warfare. The temple rededicated in 165, completely destroyed in 70 AD. But think for a moment. Had the Hasmoneans not fought and survived, the Jewish people would have passed into history, as did the Idumeans and the Phoenicians and the Philistines. And there would be today no Jews, no Christians, and no Muslims. The real miracle, however, is not that the Jews survived, but that they took time to light candles, sing songs, and play dreidel, a game of chance. Happy holidays.